Thank you for joining us here for this very special event. My name is Marcel Acosta. I'm the Executive Director here at the National Capital Planning Commission. I'd like to welcome you to our Commission offices. Our expectation of public spaces from the National Mall, Pennsylvania Avenue to our many community spaces, streets, and parks are changing. The roles have become much more flexible, accommodating daily activity and increasingly hosting novel, ephemeral, and event-based experiences. So we've been working here at NCPC on several projects related to the civic nature and use of public space, whether for commemorative, celebratory, public discourse, or community purposes. So we're exploring how to diversify and elevate our capital city's cultural profile through efforts like our recent Memorials for the Future competition. So tonight we're very excited to have two exceptional speakers to broaden our horizon. Our keynote speaker, Helen Marriage, is the director of Artichoke in the UK, and she'll share her experience and insights into her organization's efforts to produce public art and spectacle that live in the memory forever in a way that transforms people's lives by changing the way they see the world. Sakina Khan, our moderator, is the DC Office of Planning's Deputy Director for Citywide Strategy. Sakina will provide opening remarks about the city's evolving approach to public art and activation, and will also field questions for Helen. So you could also pick up Helen and Sakina's bios at the check-in desk. They also include links to learn more about their work. So with that, I'll hand over the mic to Sakina and she'll get us started. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcel. Welcome everyone to this exciting evening. I'm here to set the stage a little bit before our keynote speaker. I did think about showing some slides, but then I saw some of Helen's visuals with giant elephants and things, and I thought I would leave the visual part to her. So instead, I'm just going to offer up some thoughts. Much of Helen's large-scale work takes place in capital cities. Like London, we're a capital city. We're a historic city. DC is a home for locals and a seat for government. And in the case of DC, we're also a federal city. Both London and DC are increasingly diverse, and in the context of evolving demographics, we're figuring out ways to lift up those diverse narratives, culture, and heritage, and also figuring out how to, or continuing to figure out how to manage change, including in the built environment. In our capital city of DC, we're no stranger to large-scale events, particularly of the processional, festival, and demonstration kind. And the city in many ways was designed to support these functions. What we're starting to see more of is how the city, whether we're talking about the monumental core or the local neighborhoods, can provide the platform for more immersive, inclusive, and transformative set of experiences for residents, workers, and visitors alike. I think we'll see some of this in Helen's work. I'm looking forward to seeing her presentation. And I think we're seeing it in some of the recent work that DC has been testing out. Some of you may be familiar with the DC, with the district's draft cultural plan. This is our first comprehensive look at how government and our partners can build upon and strengthen and invest in the people, places, ideas, and communities that define culture in the district. Our cultural economy supports more than 150,000 jobs across all eight wards, and we're making some of the largest per capita investments in the cultural sector, including millions in public art. The cultural plan builds upon all of this, and it affirms approaches for affirming cultural heritage, for promoting shared stewardship, and promoting partnerships in cultural space and innovation. There's a principle in the cultural plan, or a framework in the cultural plan, that I want to dig into a little deeper, and that says that all infrastructure is a stage and all residents are performers. The Office of Planning took that principle and applied it at a very local level to a creative placemaking initiative called Crossing the Street that was designed to create fun and inclusive experiences and build community in areas experiencing rapid change. We looked at many types of infrastructure. We looked at plazas, sidewalks, parks, the sides of buildings. Some of our curators are here in the audience, as providing the backdrop or stage for temporary events. These events were fun, they celebrated heritage and neighborhoods, and they sparked conversation and connected people of different backgrounds. But they did more than that. These experiences help foster a sense of place and belonging and strengthen community and shared understandings of culture and heritage, and also led to conversations about the future use of space. In other words, while the events were tailored to the physical place and community and surrounding communities, these same events also had lasting impacts on people and place. So as we learn about Helen's work, I invite you to think about this interplay and what it means for a capital city in particular, and how a national spectacle can also connect and resonate with the local and have lasting impacts. And with that, I will turn it over to our esteemed guest, Helen, with Artichoke. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I changed the slide. I think I changed the slide, so I'm going to go back up. Did I?
Yeah. Good. Could we just have the lights down a little bit? Hello, I'm really pleased to be here tonight. My name's Helen Marriage. I'm director of a company called Artichoke, which is a whimsical name for a tiny little organisation that tries to punch above its weight in terms of the cultural activity that goes on in my country. I say my country, I don't even know what that means at the moment. As I'm sure you're all aware, we're ripping ourselves apart, trying to tear ourselves away from Europe and the four federated countries that make up the United Kingdom are also experiencing their own sense of dislocation and disorientation. So Artichoke's work, in some small and subtle way, tries to tackle some of that sense of identity crisis. And I'm going to talk about 4 projects. I was here a few years back when Marcel very kindly invited me to come, and I talked about 2 of our most renowned projects because he was interested in talking about public memorials. So we talked about the Sultan's Elephant and Anthony Gormley's piece that we produced in Trafalgar Square. So I'm not going to talk about any of that. I hope for anyone who was here then that you're going to get a completely fresh view of the kind of projects that Artichoke has been involved with over the last few years. So the 4 pieces I'm going to talk about are our biennial Lumiere Festival, which is a piece that is about the physical transformation of an urban landscape and how through changing the world, how the world looks, you can change how people feel. I'm going to talk about Temple, which is a piece that we made in the north of Ireland, or Northern Ireland, depending on your political perspective. I'm going to talk about a piece we made for the City of London, which is the old part of London. And that piece is about memorialisation. We were invited by the city to memorialise the 350th anniversary of the Great Fire, which took most of the city out. And finally, I'm going to talk about Processions, which is the project that we did this summer, which was a commemoration of the 100 years since women in the UK got to vote. So I'll take you through those 4 and then happy to answer any questions that you might have subsequently. So, oh no, I'm a Mac person, sorry. Here we go. Lumiere. Lumiere was a project that we started 10 years ago. This is in 2019 will be the 10th anniversary in the tiny town of Durham, which is a city of 40,000 people in the north of England, of 12 miles from Newcastle, if any of you know your English geography. It's a county which has been devastated by the loss of coal mining, shipbuilding and steelworks, and so its 500,000 residents across a very rural county have the highest levels of unemployment in the country, huge levels of ill health, obesity, educational underachievement, and yet at the centre sits this extraordinarily beautiful medieval jewel of a city with a 1,000-year-old castle and cathedral. I know that seems really old, it's quite old even for us. And we decided to create this event, which was a visual transformation of the city through artists working in light. We picked the wintriest, wettest, coldest weekend of the year, and we have persuaded the authorities who run the county to work with us to create a world in which Durham, this incredible city, becomes a playground, if you like, or an outdoor gallery that people can wander through and explore. So this is a piece about climate change, which creates the vision of what it would be like when we fail to address the issues that were highlighted so recently in the UN protocol on climate change, and you feel as if you're actually underwater. This is a piece we commissioned for a medieval church. It's called What Matters, and it's a representation in hand-blown glass of the cosmos and the way in which our universe is constantly expanding. It was a collaboration between the young artists that we commissioned and the Institute for Computational Cosmology, which exists in Durham, which apparently, apart from your own Harvard and MIT, is the finest place that you can study computational cosmology. So in all of these pictures that you're seeing, you see buildings, famous buildings transformed by artists working in light. This is a piece on the old Durham Miners' Hall, which was the trade union building, the syndicate building, from which the miners tried to negotiate with the mine owners. And it's a piece created by French artists which sees little stick-like figures dancing across the building as they emerge from what you can't see at the bottom, a giant pile of coal, which we installed across the street, thus preventing any access to the bus station. It would be foolish to pretend that the work we do isn't disruptive. It's sort of deliberately so, because I guess we think that really to insert this work into the DNA of a place, to really make people notice that something different is happening, then something different has to happen. So making it convenient, making it easily managed in parks and gardens and squares without closing roads to traffic, without changing the way people use the city, doesn't really work for us. And this, you see the wonderful Durham Cathedral, which is this 1,000-year-old building. And the projection that you're seeing on there is a projection of the Lindisfarne Gospels, which was an extraordinary book written over a 40-year period by a single monk who illustrated the Bible for the first time in English, these 4 Gospels. The real one is kept in the British Library, and there's a real feeling locally that that's not right and that it should come back to the place where it was made. It's a treasure of the British Library. It's never going to come back. So we thought that we could address that issue by persuading the library to give us high-resolution images, which we then treated and created into this extraordinary visual landscape, complete with a soundscape that was scored for the big area outside the cathedral, which you can see here. And finally, the amazing Japanese artist Fujiko Nakaya, 83 years old, came to Durham to make this piece. She works only in fog. And when I said to the city authorities, I'm going to make this piece with an artist who works in fog, they went, have you ever been to Durham? And I went, yeah, I've been going for 10 years. And they said, have you ever been in the winter? And I went, uh-huh. And they said, we get quite a lot of fog. And I went, not like this, you won't. What's really beautiful about this piece, and it's a very short story I'll tell, is that Fujiko is an 83-year-old Japanese artist who wanted to make her piece in this place, blanketing the west front of the cathedral, as you can see. There's a very interesting myth which exists in the city, which she had no knowledge of, which was that in the war, the Second World War, when the Luftwaffe were bombing the industrial east coast of England, they were bombing up through Newcastle and Sunderland, and they had some spare bombs, and so they turned inland to bomb Durham Cathedral because they thought that if they could knock out the emotional heart of this area, they would, destroy people's hope. And allegedly, St Cuthbert raised a mist which blanketed the entire landscape, and they couldn't find the cathedral. So how weird is this that Fujiko somehow managed to tap into that local story, and people were incredibly moved by what she made, because for them it told a different story. So that's all about transformation. And now we move on to this piece, which is very important to me. I think it's one of the most lovely things that we've ever done, although lovely doesn't really quite describe it. It's by the American artist David Best, one of your compatriots, who's the main architect of the Burning Man temples, which happen at the Burning Man Festival each year. We were working in the north of Ireland, or Northern Ireland, as you probably know it. It's a very fractured place. I'm sure you all don't need me to tell you the history of the north, but it's a place which is divided along both political and religious and sectarian lines, as you can see from this slide. We were working in a city which is known to some people as Derry, if you're Catholic or Republican, and to others as Londonderry, if you're Protestant or Loyalist, Loyalist meaning loyal to the Crown, to Britain. Catholics and Republicans mostly wanting to associate themselves with the South and the independent Republic of the South. This is the centre of the city. It's a very small place. You can walk around it in 7 minutes, around the walls. And this is the Protestant enclave, which exists. This is doing all this stuff by itself. Sorry. And this is the Catholic area, which shows the images from the Troubles, the period of the Troubles, where the British Army, originally sent in as peacekeepers, were seen eventually as the enemy. And this, you see, is what happens in the summer in this city and across the province. Kids, normally working with paramilitaries, build these bonfires, which they fill with the effigies and flags of the side that they don't love. So this is a Protestant bonfire filled with Republican flags and, as you see, the legend IRA scum. This is a Catholic bonfire filled with the flags of the Protestant side, the loyalist side. Terrifying, don't you think? Although there are those who see this simply as a community celebration of identity. When I show you the next slide, you'll see why they're terrifying. Because they're built right in the centre of the towns, and if you object, you get there's no way to object. These things are built and burnt, and there are 3,000 of them burnt across the area every year. And I was there and I thought, wow, these guys, they're so brilliant at building bonfires. They're so good at this stuff. But there must be a better way of doing this than this recycling of hatred and enmity. And so I turned to you, to your extraordinary culture, and turned to the artists of Burning Man. This is one of David's temples at Burning Man in, I think, 2012. And for all of you who I'm sure long to go or have been, you know that Burning Man is this extraordinary event which celebrates self-reliance and resilience. And to the side of the playa, where all the art is, there is constructed a temple each year built by volunteers working with a community of artists. And the temple is used as a place of refuge and reconciliation and repose. And throughout the course of the 10 days of the event, people come in there, they put in their memories, their signs of grief and hope, and they use it as a place of quiet and pilgrimage. Here you see it, here you see it gone, because on the Sunday night, in front of 70,000 people in total silence, the entire thing is burnt. And I thought there was some resonance that we could work with in terms of the Northern Irish situation. And so we started with the kids, and we asked them to design pieces that could be incorporated into our version of the temple. We work with young unemployed teenagers, people out of work, carpenters, to create a third cathedral in a city that already has two. They have a Catholic and a Protestant cathedral in line with each other. And high on a hill, we decided that we would place this third non-sectarian embracing building. So in 70, we couldn't promise the 40-degree heat and the aridness of the Nevada desert, but in 40-mile-an-hour winds, with snow falling on the ground, our community of local builders recruited from both sides of the political and sectarian divide. Oh, Solomon, it stopped. Aha! Came together to build this extraordinary building designed by David and his crew. And we placed it high up in this place called the top of the hill, where everyone told me not to do it because it was too dangerous and too violent and a place that belonged to neither side, and they told me that nobody would come. And as you see, that's why you don't need to worry about Pennsylvania Avenue. If you do something interesting, whatever the points of resistance, people will come. This is the closing evening. I'm going backwards. I'm going to do it from here. Maybe that's better. I think this isn't working. So this is the closing evening when we had to keep the place open much, much later than we'd ever intended because people just wouldn't go home. They had so much to say in this traumatized post-conflict society where people absolutely didn't meet. People were meeting a Protestant or a Catholic for the first time in their lives. Here you see it lit. And then we gathered together on the Saturday night with people chosen from the community of builders. And we torched the entire thing. And I received a text from one of the community workers who said, last time the world's press came to the top of the hill was for the Annie's Bar massacre, when 13 people were shot dead by gunmen who went into a bar. And she said, and now we've taught them that we're not like this anymore. So I think, is this just going to play? You can see a tiny little bit of what we did. Like to show those last two slides because you have to understand that in that community people rarely work together on a single project, and when you see those slides and the numbers of people that we were thanking, you see what it took for that community to actually come together and make this extraordinary thing. We used the same techniques but for a different purpose in the Great Fire 350 commemorations. So where the temple was about reconciliation between people where neighbour had been killing neighbour, where family lived in hatred of other families. For London's burning, we again wanted to use it as a catalyst for healing and reconciliation, but in very different circumstances. The City of London, I'm sure lots of you have been there. Have lots of you been to the City of London? It's the very, very old heartland of the city. 1,000 years old, with its extraordinary buildings. But in 1666, as every schoolchild will tell you, this happened. A 4-day fire that caught and burned right across the city until the red area is the area that was destroyed. 80,000 people made homeless, sent to what were effectively refugee camps in places like Moorfields and Islington, which are now absolutely part of sort of central London. But all the things that you see going on in the world in Syria or any of those places were happening here in this London that we all know and love. So we got our friends at Arup, the big engineering company, to make this little rendering of what had happened, so we could use it in schools to try and explain to kids what had actually transpired all those years ago, how quickly the fire moved. And we had these very interesting conversations with all the public agencies, which was me saying, do you know what, we think we're going to just build a replica of London, and then we're going to sail it down the Thames, and then we're going to burn it. And you can imagine the kind of conversations with everybody from the London Fire Brigade through to the Port of London Authority, who regulate the river, all these agencies that I'm sure many of you get to deal with or maybe are part of every day, just looking at us and going, why would we do this? And we're saying, but why wouldn't you? So we started again with the kids, and we asked them to write about their hopes for London. And then those designs were taken by young people that we recruited from the 5 very poor boroughs that exist around the city. The city is the very rich financial district, and around it, Islington, Camden, Tower Hamlets, Newham, Southwark. These are very, very poor areas with low levels of educational achievement. And so we trained students in CNC cutting, in carpentry, in coming to work on time, in all the skills that are needed to make a fully functioning member of our communities. We recruited from right across the boroughs, very culturally diverse workforce who were doing things that they had never really imagined themselves to be doing, particularly the girls. Some of the girls have some very interesting things to say, which you'll see in a moment. So this was our plan. This is Let's Build London, as it was in the 1600s. This is what it ended up looking like. And we really did float it. It took a year and a half of negotiation with the Port of London Authority to allow us to even begin to think that we would do this. This is right in the heart of London, between, if you can imagine, Waterloo and Blackfriars Bridges. 50,000 people watching live, 6 million watching online as we burnt London. And I can't actually repeat here publicly the words of the fire consultant that we were working with when that moment happened. But she was sending us texts, which I'm sure you can, well, I'll tell you later. Maybe I don't politely say them in this company. And here are the trusty London Fire Brigade who came in to put the whole thing out for us. So it was a huge commemoration. It was a very real commemoration. It wasn't the kind of thing that the City of London would normally be seen to do, because you would expect them to have a gala dinner in black tie with a prince or something and all of that stuff. Whereas we wanted to do something that put the kids of the community right at the heart of the design process, and we wanted people to really feel what it must have been like. And here again, you can hear them speaking for themselves. Oh, and I had different hair in those days. For most of the audience, when they witness the burning of London 1666, it'll just be a fantastic spectacle, a beautiful event happening in the middle of the river. Not many people see the detailed and profound engagement that's gone on beforehand, that offers opportunities to people to work in new ways and get new chances.
The big hook for me was not necessarily the history of the London fire, as much as it was the involvement of the kids from the community.
It was an actual shock, like, wow, is this actually what we're doing now?
Well, we're going to build a project that I don't even know who you are, but we're working together as a team.
It's really exciting being part of like something so huge. I feel quite honoured, to be honest.
They were building houses that back in the day how they used to look before the Great Fire of London.
What we're trying to say to these young people is, you can do this.
Well, the main things on this project I've learned is like carpentry, design and technology. That's what I've aimed for a little while, to go somewhere and literally work hard.
I'm communicating with people that I would never meet usually. So now it's kind of inspired me to do more construction work.
It makes me feel like I could do like anything, to be honest.
In September, this is all going to be finished, and you're thinking, and you're just like, I've done that. Like, it just makes you really, really happy. I don't know, it makes me really proud of myself.
My aim is that I want to bump into these and say, do you know what? You did that. You helped everyone else do that. You helped me do that. And that's the main thing from this project I want to see as a result.
To be able to do something like this, it's not a chance you really get that often. You know?
Afterwards, what we always hope is that that legacy continues on, that the young people who've been part of this project are going to be offered apprenticeships and traineeships, that beyond the memory of the event itself, there are real opportunities for people to take part in.
As a direct cause of being offered this placement, in the end of it, I got a job out of it. So I was like, well, I came here for work experience and I managed to pull a job out of this. I'm really happy about that.
It's made me more motivated to kind of go somewhere else and influence others as well into doing carpentry and woodwork.
350 years ago, we helped Londoners, and we should be doing the same thing now for all people.
So that was about commemoration, or memorialisation, I guess. And finally, just quickly to talk about the project that we did in June this year. So this is the 100th anniversary of the first women in the UK getting the vote. I say the first women because you had to be over the age of 30 and you had to own property before you could vote. It took another 10 years before universal suffrage was offered. And there were some very doughty campaigners. There were two strands of campaigners, suffragettes and suffragists, who took very different principled stands. The suffragists believed in negotiation, the suffragettes believed in direct action. Quite often in our campaigns today, I'm sure we see that same polarisation. The colours for the British suffrage movement were purple, or green, white and violet, give women votes. And you'll see that thread as we go through this bit of the presentation. This is Emmeline Pankhurst, who was the leader of the British suffragettes, a militant campaigner for women's rights. And we decided to emulate the processions that they had created. This is way back in 1908. It's a rather lovely document which exists in the Women's Museum. They called on women to meet and process through central London as part of their campaign of civil disobedience. Interestingly, they marched in blocks according to their professions. My favourite is block 4, which says artists, actors, musicians, nurses, physical trainers, gardeners, farmers and homemakers. Who wouldn't want to be in that group? It's terribly polite. It asks you punctually to take your place in the process. And in order to illustrate that women have always worked in textiles. Text and textiles is a way that women have expressed the feelings that they have on the inside, most publicly on the outside. So they had this whole movement which made these beautiful banners. They were very, very clever about marketing. They had colours before political parties in the UK had colours. So these green, white and violet you'll see running through all of their, all the things that they made. They were obviously terribly dangerous, as you can see from the next picture. Because you see all those policemen who are desperately trying to contain those terribly rowdy and difficult women marching under their own little placards. These are the nurses and midwives. But you can see why the authorities were frightened in this slide, which is the beginnings of 350,000 people who came together in London's Hyde Park to start this campaign. And you can see Cardiff, other places, that people were coming in from all over the country. So we decided to see whether we could replicate this activity. Something's missing off that slide, which is Edinburgh. But we decided, because of the fragmented nature of our country, that we would not do one single parade in London, but that we would split it across the 4 political capitals of the UK, so Edinburgh, Belfast, Cardiff and London. And we worked for months to galvanise women's groups across the country, working with individual artists. So we commissioned ourselves 100 artists to go into different groups to make banners that were in the tradition of the suffragette movement, but that said the kind of things that people today, women today wanted to see. We had a broad definition of women and those who identified as women and girls. Big arguments about whether that was a legitimate decision to make. And these 100 artists worked with 100 groups, and I can tell you these incredible stories, like there's a town called Hull, which is right up in the north of England, very poor place, and the community organiser there said to me, I want to work with this group. It's all young women who are either mothers or pregnant, they're teenagers, but I don't know that anyone will turn up because suffragettes doesn't mean anything to them. Or I could go and work with the sewing circle. So we said, let's not work with the sewing circle. Let's try really hard to engage these girls and see where you get to. He phoned us about 3 weeks later and said, I know you gave me a budget, and because we'd given a budget to each of the groups we were working with. He said, the problem is, and we went, yes. He said, well, I was only planning to book a minibus because I knew nobody would turn up, but I've got so many girls and they want to bring their mums and their children. And actually I need a coach, and it's going to cost £400, and I've only got 100 left. So can you find me the other money? So we, of course, gave him the other £300. And then he said, most of those women have never been out of Hull before. So for them, this project was not only a personal experience, because they did 8 weeks of workshops with artists making this work, but they then were part of this amazing thing, which I'm sure you all saw in your own Women's March that was here on Pennsylvania Avenue not so very long ago. But what we tried to do was to create an artwork. So we dressed all the women who took part in the scarves, in the colours of the suffragettes. And so from above, you had this giant moving procession that was literally like a flag surging its way through the city. And in every city of the 4, we occupied the ceremonial streets, normally reserved for visits by President Trump or extraordinary political moments. So we were able, with this artwork, this is in Scotland, where the Lord Provost lent us his official piper, who piped the entire way through the centre of Edinburgh. People were able to come together to actually celebrate and commemorate not only the 100 years that had passed, but all their hopes for the world that they would inhabit in the future, and they and their daughters would live to see. A world of equality and action and change. We managed to secure 2 hours of national BBC coverage on BBC One, which is the national state channel, and we managed to encourage women and girls of all ages to stand up and speak up and be present. That's it.
So my first question is going back to the creative process that you go through in generating ideas. And can you talk about, is the idea fixed from the beginning? Does it evolve? Is it your point of view? Is this a collaboration?
It's definitely not a collaboration. It sort of is. Artichoke's work always has an artist at its centre. So we're producers, we're not artists. And I have always believed that artists have an ability to see the world from a perspective that isn't available to most ordinary people. So they can somehow foresee the future in a way that we can't. And that when you see a great artwork, what you're seeing is something that you instantly recognise as right, but you could never have thought of it for yourself. How many times have you stood in front of an artwork and thought, oh, I could have done that? But the truth is you didn't, and you couldn't. So artists are these extraordinary creatures who can tell us more about ourselves than anybody else. So at the heart of each of our works is always an artist with their vision. Does it evolve? Not really. I mean, it sort of changes, but the fundamental idea is always clear. And we at Artichoke, we only take on, I suppose I only take on a project where I really feel passionately that it's something that we need to do. There's lots of things to be done in the world, but operating on this scale, we're pretty unique in Britain. And so quite often I'm looking for an idea that will communicate in this huge way.
Okay, so following up on that, this notion of scale.
Yeah.
And the last project that you showed us was Procession, so very large scale, national in its framing. But these events also have meaning for the host city, the local city. So how do you lift up the national piece while also respecting and engaging the local city and community?
Well, Processions is a really interesting example because not only did it work for the host city, but it had to work for the individuals who were taking part. And there were two types of taking part. One was, I just want to be there on the day, I want to be seen, I want to be present, I want to be part of what we called the stripes. So they wanted to be part of that giant moving flag. And then there were the participants who signed up for a much more profound and in-depth experience. And for them, we provided an artist to work with, a facilitator, all kinds of activity that went to support their participation. So we devised an 8-week program of work which taught people about the history of suffrage, the history of political action. It taught them sewing, it taught them all kinds of things. That was a very intense and personal thing. And lots of those groups formed especially for the project, but are continuing on now. Really interesting stuff, like in Scotland, at the Royal College of Art, they decided to collaborate with the women's prison in Edinburgh. And the students, they couldn't visit the women in prison, so the artist went between the two. And the women who were incarcerated were coming up with all these ideas and often saying, I've never voted in my life. Basically, I feel no ownership in this society. But at the end of the 8-week project, they were saying, I'll never not vote again, given they recognised the importance of their own voice, but also the courage of those people who'd fought for them to have a voice. And one of the women who came out of prison then, in time, went to meet the girls who'd been stitching the designs that they'd created. And she said, I'm here for all of those people who can't be here. And there was a debate between the students about whether, because in Britain, I don't know if it's the same here, but prisoners don't have a vote, although there's a big campaign that they should, that you shouldn't be disenfranchised just because you're incarcerated. So the students had a huge debate around that, about the issues of that. So it was provoking political thinking and political action in very personal ways, as well as delivering this huge spectacle that was filmed and shown on television and had millions of people watching.
You had touched on, in your presentation, this notion of healing and restoration as a key impact, but I was also struck by what you said in terms of these are deliberately disruptive interventions. Does that go hand in hand? In order for the healing and restoration, does it have to be deliberately disruptive?
I think it has to make an impact, because the thing that we're most interested in is the audience members or the participants that would never come to a dedicated arts institution. They would never buy a ticket for the theatre. They might not even know how, or certainly wouldn't want to spend the money. They would never go to a gallery. They would never feel comfortable. They would never go to a concert hall. I want those people who are just milling about in their daily lives. And in order to get them, you can't do the things we do in a place that isn't right in the middle of their life, because they won't go to a park or a secluded space or a space that's convenient for the city because it doesn't impact the traffic or any of that kind of stuff. So there's something about, when we did Lumiere, the project I showed at the beginning, when we did it in London, it took me 2 years to negotiate, but we managed to persuade Transport for London to close all the streets in central London. So for anyone who's been there, we closed Regent Street, we closed Oxford Circus, we closed Piccadilly, we closed St James's, we closed all the streets around King's Cross, and there was no traffic for 4 days. Now, the conversations that we were having with the transport planners were all based in fear. Their fear that everybody would hate them for changing, you know, the number 83 bus from this route to a different route. What they couldn't get themselves to the point of understanding was that actually people would want to come. And the fact that the bus route was changed by 2 streets wasn't the important thing. The important thing was that this strange and wonderful opportunity to walk down the centre of Piccadilly without fear of your life because there was no traffic was something that people would relish. So I guess we always believe that, you know, you think about cities. I mean, you're all involved in cities in some way or another. I think if you talk to planners and architects and people about cities, they would imagine in their heads a picture of buildings and streets. And actually, if you're doing the job we're doing, what you're imagining is the flow through of people through those spaces. What you said, the city is a theatre, the people are the performers. And so, you know, we've all lived in a world where we've become complicit in the idea that a city is a machine for getting people to work on time, or getting them to the shops, or getting them to school, or that those are the important things. Whereas actually the things that you will measure your life by are not your daily journey on a dockless scooter or a bus or a tram going backwards and forwards. The things that you'll measure your life by are those incredible moments when you fell in love, or when your kid took their first steps, or you were picked for the school play, or any of those things that mark out the moments in your life rather than the routines. And I guess that Artichoke, in a completely self-minded way, we're dedicated to creating those moments in a city's life in the way that they happen to you in a personal way. So our work doesn't fit the normal categorization. So, you know, the visual arts people think it's too popular, and the theatre people think it's not theatrical, and it sits in this weird hinterland that plays on the idea of an emotional connection with its public. The piece that you saw in Derry, it's hard to explain what Derry feels like most of the time. It's a traumatized post-conflict city where there is a ton of hatred and enmity and 450 years of thinking that the other are people that you should fight and loathe and not speak to. And that project, 65,000 people came. The population's only 50,000. And people were embracing each other and recognizing the similarity of their experience rather than the difference. So that sense of creating something disruptive enough to take you out of your normal way of thinking, that's part of the point.
So I do want to open it up a little bit now to the audience if there are any questions. Any questions? I have more questions I can ask, but...
questions
yes,
over here.
Yes, we've got a couple questions. So,
Thanks so much for very inspiring stories. I'm just thinking practically, logistically, though, about some of the events that did not formulate because of permitting issues or budgetary constraints. What's the rate of failure, if I may, of some of the projects that you might hope for?
Currently, in the company's existence of 12 years, 0% failure rate.
that's zero. Translation.
Sorry. Because if you really want to do something badly enough, the people who might say no, honestly, they only say no because they're frightened. They only say no because to say yes might be the wrong thing, and they might be in trouble with their boss or sacked, or, they're just anxious that saying yes to something unorthodox is going to expose them personally. So while people tell you when you're doing these projects that you have to create institutional partnerships, which you do, what you really have to do is make friends with the people in the organisation so that you can hold hands and decide to go forward together in this thing that may seem lunatic. But what you know is that at the end of it, they're going to own it more than you do. I have to create a situation where the people I'm negotiating with, which is what I spend most of my life doing, want the thing to happen more than I do.
And that can be the Port of London Authority not wanting to close the river, or it can be, the traffic planners not wanting to shut the streets. And it's actually about mindset. It's about deciding that a city doesn't belong to those people who run it on a day-to-day basis, that they serve the wider public, and the wider public wants to see this stuff. So you just have to edge them towards a place where they're not so anxious.
In the back.
Question. I think this is on, yes. So here we have a lot of people who always are concerned about security and closing streets, and now when we're doing festivals, we have to bring in big trucks and block things. How have you managed to make security not be the #1 issue with the projects you've done?
So security, particularly if you're working in London, is a huge issue, because you'll all remember the recent knife attacks and the trucks that have driven into pedestrians on our streets. I think there's a real determination in London, which is one of the things I'm really proud of, which is that those people who would perpetrate those incidents shouldn't win, and that we're not going to change our way of life in order to respond to what they're doing. So we work really closely with the Metropolitan Police and the Mayor's Office and all kinds of people to put in place all the security measures that we can that would allow people to work, to be safely in the streets, but not to make it so obvious that it becomes the story. So we do a ton of planning always about corridors that might provide access for vans or trucks to drive down or whatever. We put in what's called hostile vehicle mitigation, HVM, which is the kind of things that you're talking about, but we do it in quite a sort of subtle way. But when we did Lumiere London, we could talk about the dirty subject of money. The budget for Lumiere London was about £4 million, and probably £1 million of it went on safety and security. So it's not cheap.
There was one right in the back you've had your hand up.
The cathedral that you built on the hilltop in Ireland, how long did that take to build? And what was the wood that you used to build it?
So the whole project took us 2 years from thinking about making it happen to delivery. The process of the workshop building was probably about 3 to 4 months of working with that community. The recruitment of all of those people and all of that negotiation took probably 6 months before that. And the wood was a kind of, let me get this right. It was a kind of, my brain's dying, sorry, it's jet lag, kind of Chinese ply that was both. What was really important about it, was that it was a clean burn. The bonfires I showed you beforehand are full of tyres and painted furniture and all that stuff, and terribly polluting. This was what we agreed with the fire brigade would be a clean burn. The important thing about the wood was that it had to be strong enough that you could cut it with a CNC cutter and it wouldn't all fray, but that it would allow the flames to take hold very quickly, because the last thing you wanted was to announce a bonfire and then for it not to burn. So we were very careful about the kind of, we took advice from David Best and the whole Burning Man team about what kind of wood we should procure, and we worked very carefully to make sure that it could both hold the design but also burn.
Hello. I wanted to ask you to follow up on money and funding.
Yeah.
About the secret sauce to procuring sponsors. We work for the Georgetown Business Improvement District, a bid. We put on a little light art festival called Georgetown Glow. It's December 1st to January 6th, everybody. And
that's not little, that's a month.
Exactly. So we're very fortunate to receive a grant from the DC Commission on Arts and Humanities, and we're now going into our 5th year, or 5th edition. And I've seen what you've done, of course, with Lumiere Durham, and of course with London, and just, I've seen some of your funding sources, but, how do we we're looking really more at sort of private organizations and sponsors, and sort of what was that path like for you all?
So your funding situation here in the US is really different from ours. So the Arts Council of England do have money, and they do give it to particular projects. I have to say they've never particularly been interested in Lumiere, though they fund quite a lot of our other projects. Normally, when we start a fundraising campaign, we look for a big investor who would be the sort of bedrock of the whole thing. And in the case of London, it was the Mayor of London, and in Durham, it's the County Council, which is the authority for that whole area. And then with that money, we can use that to persuade others that they want to be part of the party, if you like. So money will come from various arts sources, but also from corporate investors and from individual givers, philanthropists or whoever. It's painstaking work. So I think Lumiere London, we had 70 different funders. It's a nightmare to manage. One day when I'm a grown-up, somebody will say, Helen, we'd really love you to do this project, here's the check. But in the however many years I've been working, that has never happened. So it's a really careful stitching together of interests and trying to serve, because nobody will ever just give you money. They want to know what they're going to get from it. So when you're pitching for money, I'm sure you know this, the most important thing is to not see it from your own perspective and think how great you are and people ought to give it to you. It's to see what you can do to help them fulfill whatever purpose. And that sort of works, but also to be realistic about what any organisation or individual might give you. I think the fundraising situation here in the US seems much healthier in terms of individual giving. It's really hard. People who've had money for 1,000 years just never give it away.
I want to follow up with one question on that. Your events are large scale. They're very resource intensive, a lot of money, labor intensive. It was really interesting to see the fabrication that happens. And then in many instances, these are set on fire. And within DC, within at the local level, we've been having this conversation about our own creative placemaking program, which were temporary events. What is your take on temporary versus permanent? I mean, and the reaction also of all those collaborators and communities that you're working in when they see this great product disappear. Of course, there's the lasting impact on memory, but do folks have opinions on that after the fact?
I think at the beginning they're always saying it's such a shame. With the temple, people used to say, it's so beautiful. Why would you destroy it? But the real answer is we wouldn't have built it if we weren't going to burn it. So there's an ultimate purpose. And the thing about permanent, well, okay, you're all here on Pennsylvania Avenue. Name me 5 people who are memorialized on this street.
That's for the audience, not for me.
Marcel will, of course, know them all off by heart, so we're not letting him play this game. There are a ton of statues, aren't there, not in this street? Do you ever look at them? Benjamin Franklin. It's hard, isn't it?
Well, you have Meade.
Boss Shepherd.
You're at General Meade.
Yes.
That's down at 4th and Pennsylvania Avenue, directly opposite the east wing of the National Gallery.
Uh-huh.
Then you start, and before that, down at the end of Pennsylvania Avenue, you have the Navy and Seamen's Memorial, which is the terminus of Pennsylvania Avenue.
But I'm talking about people.
Oh, people.
Pershing, you have Pershing, don't you, in Pershing Park?
That's the other end of
Yeah, but my point is that you can create these permanent memorials, and they're really meaningful in the moment that you create them, but then nobody even sees them. Who knows what's on the top of the Temperance Memorial on this street? It's a bird. Look,
It's a heron.
it's a heron. But you walk past it, you know, do you notice there's somebody Scott I walked past today, a memorial to somebody, Marcel, you must know, because you're in charge. But my point is that you can memorialize in bronze and stone and carvings and all of that stuff, and it's really meaningful at the moment that you create that memory. But for generations subsequently, it's just furniture. You don't even notice. And I'm not making a case for temporary against permanent. I'm just saying that there is a place for temporary because it magically creates a moment where you have to be there because you know it's not going to last. So more people are impacted because they feel like in a world where we're totally terrorized by the screen, by the phone and the computer and the iPad and the television, where you can have any experience you like virtually, that somehow there's something really important about having an experience for real that you share with everybody else who's standing next to you, that you can touch and smell and feel. And that's why the temporary, for me, is always more emotionally powerful than the permanent. There's a man showing us a naught.
Oh, there's a zero. So we are coming to a conclusion of this particular temporary experience or moment. And I want to thank Helen for speaking with us and showing us her work, and also for the questions from the audience. I also want to thank Marcel and NCPC for hosting this. Marcel, did you want to say any final words?
Oh, again, I'd like to thank you, Sakina, for moderating this session, and also to Helen, who came all the way from the United Kingdom to talk to us tonight. And enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. Let's give them a last round of applause.